Good morning, everybody. I'm Phyllis. I'll be the facilitator today. Unfortunately, Louise and Michelle are not going to be here. They are going to the Texas State House for a rally against the ban on abortion. And so we don't have a land acknowledgement this morning. I will say, we'll have to get Louise to start emailing that to us. So Eracism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was founded in New Orleans in 1993, we seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we believe in treating people of all colors, and I will add genders, with love and respect. Join us. So everybody here is familiar with the rules. We ask that when you're not speaking, you keep yourself on mute, and that to get on the list, you raise one finger, and I'll put you on the list to talk. You are allowed to ask a clarifying question of the speaker, and you can indicate you want to do that by raising two fingers. A clarifying question is very specific. It is if you did not understand something the person said, you couldn't hear, you didn't understand a word, you didn't understand a term, you wanted them to repeat something, all of that is okay as a clarifying question. What is not a clarifying question is a rebuttal in the form of a question. Or just asking their general knowledge on a topic or their opinion on something random that is not being discussed. So I will holla at people if they ask a question that's not a clarifying question. And let's see, what have I forgotten? Oh, about 15 minutes or 20 minutes before 11:30, we'll do the final go round. I hope some more people will log on, but we might have a small group today because of the Texas group being out. Did Nora log off? Where she went? So I will go around and call on people to introduce themselves, say where you are in the country, how long you've been involved with Erace, and your name, of course. Sorry, I was letting people in. So I will start with Nancy.
Good morning, I'm Nancy. I've been coming to Erace since June of 2007, and I'm located in New Orleans.
Thank you. Dee Dee?
No.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dee Dee. I've been coming to Erace for about 1.5 years, and I like being around like people, and I live in California.
Welcome again. Marva?
Good morning. My name is Marva, and I've been coming to Erace post Katrina. I'm located in New Orleans, in the Chantilly area. I'm a retired RN of the state of Louisiana. Thank you.
Thank you. Stanton?
Good morning, Stanton Korn. I am in Austin, Texas. Should probably be headed to the state capitol, but it's when I know I'm getting old and it's very hot. So here instead this morning. So good morning.
Good morning. Bill?
I'm Bill Ives, and I'm coming to Erace for about 5 years. Cindy will not be here because she's going to a meeting of the NOLA Grannies. The NOLA Grannies are a group of women in New Orleans who meet the immigrants on the bus. New Orleans immigrants come from the bus, from the border, and New Orleans is a distribution hub. So they meet them with welcome packages. Most of them have no idea where they are or where they're going. So they rectify that with a map, and they give them various travel things to go on their
That's
journey.
great. Thank you. Pedro?
Hey, good morning. I'm from just outside of Austin, where I've been for pretty much my whole adult life, born in Austin. Been coming to the Erace meetings for the last, more than a year and a half or so, and really enjoy the information and look forward to it each Saturday morning. So thanks for having me.
Welcome back. Larry?
Good morning. I started with Erace somewhere in the mid-90s. And after Hurricane Katrina, I was reassigned to Mississippi. I was gone for about 8 years. Came back to New Orleans in 2013. And I'm just happy to be here this morning.
Thank you. Marla?
Good morning. My name is Marla. I've been coming to Erace for the last couple years now, and I'm also in the New Orleans area. Happy to be here.
Nora?
Hi, everybody. I'm in Austin, and I've been coming for a little under a year, I think, and glad to be here.
Thanks. Cheryl?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Interested in hearing this discussion today. It's quite an interesting article, and thank you.
Thank you. I brought this article for obvious reasons with what's going on in terms of the Supreme Court draft decision. And Nancy actually suggested the concept of anti-abortion being a form of white supremacy. And the book that's mentioned in here, The Birth Dearth, I've heard about it. It's been mentioned in like several different things I've been hearing or reading about this topic. So unfortunately, I have to restrain myself throughout this discussion, but I'll have a lot to say at the end. You'll probably see my face gritting my teeth or something. So I will say, I think I've said all the rules. So the list is open. Nancy?
Yes, I did. I had sent Phyllis a clip. I forget the woman's name, about this topic of, she didn't say don't get it twisted. She said, understand that this is about increasing the white population and it's about maintaining white supremacy. And it made me, I sent that to Phyllis, and I had seen a couple of months ago, I don't know if anybody watches 60 Minutes, but I think it's Hungary in Europe is paying their citizens, they give them vans, and car seats, and extra money to have babies. And they only give it to, like, you can't be, like, say, from the Middle East and have a swarthy or dark complexion and come to Hungary and get the same benefit. It has to be white babies. White families will get it. No one else gets it. And it is to increase, specifically for increasing the white population. So when I saw this clip on Instagram, well, I've always thought that, and I also think that they keep during the census that they keep the minority who are the majority now populations artificially low. I've always thought that they never really truly counted everybody, and they don't in the census, and that the minority numbers are way higher than what the government is saying for that reason. And along with redistricting, which they vetoed 2 majority Black districts, that all of this, oh, and not to mention also The Handmaid's Tale, anybody wants to jump in there about that, that all these things, it's a sinister effort to not only control women, but to increase the white population. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to set the timer. Well,
That's
now
okay.
hopefully I'll remember. I wanted to just add that the person who wrote the article that I brought today, her name is Stacy Patton, and she's a professor at Howard University, and she's also written a book explaining why she's against spanking children, especially in Black families. So if anybody's interested in that topic. The list is open. Bill?
I have to admit, I was puzzled by this article at first because it's been my assumption in what I've read is that the abortion ban adversely affects people of color more than white people, because they're less likely to have the means to go to another location, or they're more likely to have a job they can't leave. So I was wondering about this article. And then in the middle of the night, I got an aha. And I remembered that Amy Barrett was pushing adoption as a remedy for abortion. And I remembered, based on that, remember that there's a scarcity of white babies for couples to adopt. That's why they go to countries like Hungary and Russia for white babies. And so this was pushing adoption to increase the supply of babies at the adoption store. And I know a number of people who've tried successfully and others who tried unsuccessfully to adopt babies. And so they don't care if there's more Black babies as long as there are more white babies for adoption, is my assumption. And they will do what they're. The other thing that was interesting is they claimed, and it makes a lot of sense, that the oppression of newborns, whether they're white or Black, is done to create, especially white babies, poor white babies, is done to increase white grievance. And they can blame the oppression on people of color and the Democrats. So that was an interesting twist too, to the article. So it took me a while to understand it, but when I did, it made a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Perfect timing. The list is open again. Marva?
In the early 50s, white females are provided with birth control pills. And it was used to advance white families financially, limited the family size. You could advance with a home, with 2 cars. It was a military secret. I use that because the military has so many secrets. It was hidden from the public because they wanted to keep the Black families in property. My mom had 10 children. We always struggled. I can remember my daddy had 2 jobs. It wasn't to the early 70s, commercials being advertised where the public knew about birth control. Black females asked the doctors, family doctors about that, and family there was a service provided to Black people and poor white people. Family Planet was the name of the organization, and they could receive free birth control pills. It wasn't till the early 70s that birth control was advertised. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. The list is open. Oh, Larry, go ahead.
You know, as a Christian who's been pastoring for 34 years, sometimes everything that comes forth, somebody might misinterpret it to be coming from a religious perspective. And so sometimes it might have a tendency to be dismissed because that's just your religious views. So I'm coming this morning, not from a religious perspective, but from the perspective of being a human. And I think when we get beyond Black and white, Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, Supreme Courts, I think when we get beyond those arguments, we have a fundamental question. What is that is in the mother's womb? Plain and simple. I mean, if I were to shoot a man to death, if I went to court, it may be ruled justifiable homicide. It might be ruled murder, first, second degree. It might be ruled as an accident. It might be ruled self-defense. But whatever the ruling is, the bottom line is I kill a human being. So I think the fundamental question here is, what is that is in the mother's womb? Is it being human? Or is it being something else? Can it grow into anything other than a human? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Is that getting on the list, Dee Dee? Yeah. Okay, you're next. Anybody else? Marva. Pedro.
In California, the orientation is somewhat different than this article. And so for me, this was a real eye-opener because I had never thought of the abortion issue being a white privilege, white supremacy concept. And so I read that article with very open eyes. And it was interesting to me. in California, the abortion issue is more of a personal issue.
Bill.
It's, you know, women look at it, and sometimes men do too, as if we have a child, can we provide for it? And that's a lot of the issue. I went to Planned Parenthood with my oldest daughter once, and it was amazing the couples that were there. And they had made a decision that having a child right now was not a good thing. And that's a hard decision to make, and they should be respected for it. The other thing I wanted to mention was, in accordance with the law, after a fetus isn't a fetus until it makes 20 weeks gestation. And so in the eyes of the law, that is considered medical waste. Now, in California, that's, I have run into folks that have been pregnant and something happened, and usually it'll happen in the bathroom. And the mother called her doctor and told the doctor what had happened. And since it was below the 20-week limit, the doctor, in all justification, said, flush the toilet, because that's medical waste. And I think that negating someone's feelings like that and saying something like that really shouldn't be happening, because that's their belief system. That was their child. They don't care if it made 20 weeks or not. That was their child. And as a funeral director, I really had an issue with them saying that. I'm done.
Thank you. That's perfect timing. Next is Marva, then Pedro, then Bill.
I asked you what right the decision needs to be taken out of woman's hands. Religious beliefs that we all gonna come before God for judgment. All decisions we make. I'm willing to stand before God and on Judgment Day, because decisions I make, I'm willing to be judged at the last breath I take. Therefore, I don't need nobody to influence the outcome of Judgment Day. I'm willing to pay for my mistake as a woman. Who knows whether it was a mistake to end life. In who determines when life begins? Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Next is Pedro, then Bill, and the list is open after Bill. Stanton,
Yeah, hey, thanks.
Larry.
I was particularly intrigued by some sentences in the middle towards the end that said, but white America also needs to traumatize those same white babies physically, emotionally, and spiritually, so they can grow up to accept violence and racism as natural and normal. Yeah, I mean, I really do believe that racism is an acquired feeling state and action state or whatever, and we're acculturated that way. I really got on the list though to ask a question that I'm having a little bit of problem understanding. I know a lot of conservative people and liberal people and everything in between, and there's a lot of people that are against abortion. I'm not one of them, but it seems that their reasons are not because of white supremacy. They're because of something else. But I do appreciate what the author is suggesting as well. So I was trying to understand those two things a little bit better. I don't think I'm really getting, I'm a little confused there. So I thought I would just take the time to ask that question if anyone can elaborate or clarify that. So thank you.
I'll try to answer that. I think I understand what you're saying. I think there are lots of things that are presented as being about one sort of position or opinion that have underlying things that are more hidden to make the people who support it not as terrible looking as as they already are. So, I mean, does that make sense? That just because it's not presented by, any of the anti-abortion people as being, we want more white babies. Although I will say there is language in this draft to something about the domestic supply of infants for adoption is low. That language is in the draft. Yeah, I think white supremacy has its tendrils, its thorns in everything. And it's not always obvious. Okay. Bill, you're next, then Stanton, then Larry.
Pedro, I was puzzled at first by the article, as I mentioned. And I think it's more, I don't think everyone who's against abortion is trying to make more white babies. But I think overall, it's a violation of church and state because people are against abortion for religious reasons. And that's fine. They don't have to have abortions. But someone who doesn't believe that should not be controlled by their religious beliefs. It doesn't mean that parents totally control their children. They can't beat their children, for example. One of my wives was a social worker in Detroit, and she would encounter parents who said, "It's my God-given right to beat my children." And that's also a violation of church and state because the state doesn't believe that that's a God-given right to beat your children. But I think it's more white privilege than white supremacy because these white couples, they want a baby. And so they want to be, they want their desire to be done because they're used to getting their way. So they want a baby and they want to do everything they can to get a baby. And I don't blame them for wanting a baby. I have many people who've adopted babies when they couldn't have one themselves, but don't abuse the rest of the world in order to get your babies. Don't make a white woman or a black woman carry to term so you can have their baby, because women are not a vessel. They should have their own say over their own bodies. But anyway, I was puzzled at first, as you said, Pedro. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Larry had a clarifying question for you, Bill.
Yeah.
said, yes,
did?
Bill, you said
Oh,
that,
Larry,
Larry.
yes, you said that a person that is against abortion, I believe you said is usually for religious reasons. So my question to you, can an atheist be against abortion? Can a person who has never read the Bible or the Quran or
I
the,
think, Larry, you're stating an
Torah.
opinion.
Pardon?
You're really
well, I'm
stating an
happy to
opinion.
answer.
No, I'm asking a question. He
I
said
know,
No,
but
he's
that,
asking a
No,
question.
Sorry, time.
I-
Sorry, point of order. I think you're asking a question to make a point. It is a question, but it is to make a point. I think you're making your own point.
no, I'm asking a question.
I understand you're asking a question, but we have clarifying questions, then we have rebuttal questions that we don't allow. So,
I interpreted Larry's question as a clarifying question, and I'm happy
well,
to
I'm the
answer it.
facilitator. So
Okay,
it's pretty strict,
I'll
but
answer Larry's question the next time I speak.
okay, thank you. So next is Stanton on the list and then Larry. And then Bill, do you want to get back on?
Yeah, to answer Larry's question.
And then anything else, anybody else want to get on? Nancy. Okay, Stanton, go
I
ahead.
do, Phyllis, I want to get on.
Okay, Greer.
So I'm going to kind of address Larry's point, question, whatever you want to call it, by saying that I don't think this is necessarily about religion, but it's about people's sense of morality and legislating morality. And I am not religious. I consider myself an atheist. I don't believe other people's religions should impact me. I don't believe necessarily that other people's morality should impact me. And if we legislate what we agree as some sense of morality collectively, and that's unfortunately subject to change by legislative fiat or judicial fiat, but to me, this is an issue of slippery slopeism. And to address the question about, well, that thing inside the womb has the potential, well, then that also could be taken a step further and say that there should only be procreational sex. There should be no birth control. Certainly it legislates into other people's sexual, philosophies, for lack of a better word, or sexual orientations. And again, it's the legislation and the judicial fiat of what's considered moral. Yeah, at some point we either agree on what morality is. We all, I think, agree that homicide is immoral unless it's quote unquote under justifiable circumstances. And so if we had come to a point collectively where we said that viability is where the line is drawn for the fetus, then to outlaw things that happen before viability as far as an abortion, now that to me becomes a question of legislating morality again, because that issue was addressed. We thought we had come to a collective consensus, and now you got other people wanting to push their morality on the rest of the society, including other issues, birth control, gay rights, etc. Thanks.
Thank you, Stanton. Larry, you're next.
Thank you. On CNN and MSNBC, they have a tendency not to bring on anybody that have a contrary point of view to the issue of abortion. So it's always a one-sided conversation. And I hope that's not what this become, and that you cannot ask a question without being muzzled. But when we talk about maintaining the white population, another way to maintain the white population is to decrease the Black population. And that was one of the concepts of the issue of eugenics in the early 1900s, was to consider certain people as inferior or disposable. Now you have more Black women. Some people talking about this is going to affect Black and poor women more than anybody else. Personally, as a Black man, I resent that, because I think there's a scheme now. You have more Black women having abortions than white women. So I think that's a part of the scheme to increase the Black population. the white population so you can decrease the black population. Why won't they have gun controls? Even when Sandy Hook took place and those 23 little white kids were killed, why won't they have gun controls? Because they know the majority of people who are getting killed are blacks, which is true. And that's another way of decreasing the black population. So I read between the lines, and I don't see this so much as maintaining white population as decreasing black population. But again, I think Stanton brought up the issue of morality, morals. Can a person have morals without being quote unquote overly religious? And I think, yes, they can. And I think that's the question on the table. If we don't have morals, if we don't have a sense of right and wrong, thank you.
Thanks, Larry. I want to clarify what a clarifying question is. It is, I didn't understand what you meant by, could you repeat what you said? Could you repeat that person's name? Could you explain that term? But when this question starts with, do you think, that is more a question that it's the person is really trying to make a statement, which Larry, I think you just answered your own question that you were trying to ask Bill. So that's why I cut it off, because we have a lot of times that the question asked is not a clarifying question, and it's kind of frustrating. So, okay, Bill, you're next, then Nancy, then Greer.
Yeah, first of all, and not to disagree with you, Phyllis, but I am. I interpreted Larry's question as a clarifying question because he was asking, I said, it's usually on religious grounds. That's a violation of church and state. And he asked whether it could be on non-religious grounds. And I think, absolutely. And that's why I use the word usually rather than always. I think white privilege is the base of it for some people to have more white babies to adopt. These families who want to adopt are not used to not getting their way. So they want more white children to adopt. And I don't think white privilege, if people claim there's a religious basis to white privilege, they're misusing religion. Because there is no religious basis to white privilege. It's immoral. And as Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. Or maybe that was Moses. But anyway, it's a commandment in the Bible. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And so if you do that, you can't have white privilege. You need to treat everyone as the same. So anyway, the evangelical movement started to promote segregation. And when that seemed to, legal segregation seemed to founder, abortion was a new cause for them, a wedge issue. When Roe v. Wade was passed, the evangelicals weren't that concerned. They thought it was an issue for Catholics and not for them. But then they politicized abortion after they failed in segregation. Although, as we know, there's a lot of de facto segregation going on, but technically it's illegal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Nancy, then Greer. Anybody else want to get on the list? Marla?
And Cheryl. Cheryl has her
Cheryl,
finger,
gotcha.
has her finger up.
Go ahead.
It's white supremacy. I see it all as an issue of white male supremacy, because limiting a woman's autonomy over her own body. Okay, you got people protesting and marching and carrying on and acting a pure fool over the fact that you ask them to wear a mask. My body, my choice. Do you think anything could be more personal than having to carry a baby to term for 9 months and then not knowing how you're going to take care of it, what, you know, upending your entire life, okay? And then you provide nothing and criticize, demonize people who ask for housing. You will not increase the minimum wage. Most women who find them end up, you know, some do succeed by sheer determination to uplift themselves, but dooming someone to a life of minimum wage job, providing substandard healthcare, substandard housing. You provide, don't want them to have food stamps, demonize them for that. How can you say that this is not white male privilege? I mean, I just don't understand how the two, limiting a woman's right to her body to determine what happens to her body, is not, and then not providing resources to help them afterwards. How is it not supremacy? How is it not supremacy?
Thank you, Nancy.
And also The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
Okay.
Greer, you're next.
I'm gonna ask a question, just in general, to see if anybody knew or knows who this guy is. His name is Kermit Gosnell. Anybody knows who he is? Okay. Kermit Gosnell is a doctor. He worked in Pennsylvania. He became a doctor, like, I guess in the 40s or the 50s. But his practice turned to abortion in the 60s, and he was a proponent of abortions. This man went unregulated doing late-term abortions. Women died, children died. There was no government oversight. Babies were being born alive, and they were killed. There were many complaints since the 70s. He finally was put in jail after trial. We're talking about in 2013. And you guys don't even know that this man existed and what he did this in Pennsylvania, predominantly immigrant and Black women. He was a Black doctor. Again, there was no oversight. When they went into his office, they had babies in freezers, babies in jars, babies in garbage cans, babies everywhere. So I'm gonna go with, yes, this is white supremacy, because they put these Planned Parenthood type clinics in our neighborhood so we could have easy access to abortions. And I'm not going to say it's white male supremacy totally, because white women uphold white men in their wrongdoing. There are a lot of women who are about to uphold should Roe versus Wade change. And there are a lot of women fighting for it to change. And I'm going to point out something. I was trying to explain it to some friends of mine about how things come in a circle. We had white women being oppressed, and they decided to do the feminist movement. Feminist movement took off. Women were allowed to do more things. But in coming in full circle, I want you to think about this. White men now can become white women. So think about it. White womanhood is being co-opted by actually males. That's it.
Thank you, Greer. Next is Marla, then Cheryl, then Dee Dee, and Larry.
I didn't have a whole lot to say that's new, except I was thinking about some of the comments about morals and morals that we can all agree on. And just questioning, I guess, well, I already know my own answer to the question, but who establishes those morals and who decides whose set of morals are correct versus another person's? My morals and my sense of right and wrong are that people have a right to make a decision about their own bodies. Women, men, white people, Black people, I mean, all people have a decision, have the ability to make decisions about their bodies. And that's it. There's no question. And that's in my moral code or my set of morals. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as, you know, non-religious based, because we decided morals don't have to have a religious basis to them. Does that make me immoral that I find that to be one of my top things, you know, one of my top beliefs, and that's one of my morals, if you will. That's it.
Thank you, Marla. Cheryl, you're next. I can't hear you, but you're unmuted. Can't hear you. Do you need to go out and come back on again? Okay, I think she's up there. Moved her. No, can't hear you.
Tell her to check her volume.
Well, she jumped off. She's gonna come back on. So I'm gonna put her on the list. Dee Dee, you're next.
I wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Nancy said about women choosing or being trapped into the responsibility of having a child that wasn't planned and they have no means
Cheryl,
to
you're
take care of.
second.
I think, I'm not sure if it was Georgia, the state of Georgia or Alabama, but one of the states signed into law that the issue of a rape could not be aborted. And that to me is someone seriously not caring about anybody, because you're scarred for life if you're raped, okay? And then to have to carry the product of that rape full term. I mean, yes, it is a person, but that just adds a whole lot more in assault to injury on that. And there will be no getting over that. And they cited an incident of a 12-year-old girl that was raped and she did come up pregnant. And according to their law, there wasn't a thing she could do about it. And I think that is a non-empathetic, hardcore travesty. I think that's horrible. I'm done.
Thanks, Dee Dee. Stanton, I'll put you on the list. So Cheryl, I'm gonna do Larry, then you, then Stanton, and Glenn said check your volume. And I see you, Bill and Pedro. Okay. So Larry.
Okay, I think Marva asked the question about who sets morals. Well, the society in which we live sets morals in order for the perpetuation of the society itself. And so society establishes what's moral. Of course, that word might still be questionable, but society establishes what's right and what's wrong. And if we don't have something to govern society, then the question is, what if everybody was doing it? And I think that is one of the standard issues when we look at what's right, what's wrong, what's moral. What if everybody was doing it? Would society grow or would it decrease? And somebody else said that it's a, you know, it's a fetus. It has been established by law that it's a fetus. But remember, law also established that Black people were not humans. They were 3/5 of a human. The law also said that Black people had no rights. They were just chattel property. So we can't go by the law. There has to be a higher moral law that we look after. And I started off the beginning of this morning with a disclaimer. But I'm gonna take that disclaimer off the table for just a minute and say that Jesus, when he was in the womb, he was who he was in the womb. There was nothing to say that he was a fetus or he could be aborted. So yes, there has to be standards. There has to be standards for the good of society and the human race. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Next, Cheryl.
One thing that I'm observing is that instead of really reading this article and talking about white supremacy and abortion and staying on that subject, we are going off on our own personal religious tracks. I'm just observing that. So I got on to speak because I Googled, are there white babies for adoption? And it seems that children who are white are slightly more likely to be adopted out of foster care. 4,000 children, this is from 2020, were in foster care. And 2017, so this is 5 years old, about 44% were white, but 49% of those children were adopted. White babies cost more to adopt. When asked the question why, it's because there aren't enough of them. In 2020, 29, almost 30,000 white babies were adopted, and 10,000 Black babies or African-American babies were adopted. So there is some truth to what the article says as I research it, just bringing that up.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Stanton, you're next.
Larry addressed a little bit of what I was going to say initially about who, again, determines what morality is. And yes, morality does change from society to society and from generation to generation. And then it becomes a question of what is the collective morality at any given time. And that's when people have to get out and vote and have to elect people who are in agreement with their personal moralities. We all have our individual morality, but then that's assuming I can impose that on my neighbor and anybody else in the group here. So yeah, morality is an ever-changing concept as far as societies are concerned. If you believe that there's only one true moral purpose from a higher spiritual power, that then assumes that that's the only correct answer, and that everything else then by definition is incorrect. And that is problematic for me. And just back to what Cheryl had just said, yeah, I understand what today's topic is. It's the specific discussion of whether or not being anti-abortion is a question of white supremacy, but I think it's much bigger than that. And it would be just too limiting if we were just going to leave it at that concept, because we can just say, for example, that it is, and then what? So if it is, well, what do we do about it? And so I don't think it can just stay solely on topic without having some expansion of the conversation.
Thank you, Stanton. I have now Bill, Pedro, and Greer, and I'm closing the list after Greer so that we can go into the wrap up. I'm closing the list after Greer, Bill. I can't hear you.
I thought I was on the list.
I said Bill, Pedro, and Greer.
Oh, I am on the list and
You're-
I'm now speaking.
You're next.
Thank
Yes.
you. I apologize.
That's okay, I was confused.
So I want to agree with two people. I agree with everybody, but in particular, Larry, we do need morals. And I agree with you completely. We need to have moral standards, but they can't be based on one particular religion, because religions differ in what those moral standards are. So it needs to be the combined, a lot of morals are religious based. My morals are religious based, even though I'm not practicing religion now, but they came from religion and Christianity in particular. Anyway, that needs, the community needs to decide collectively on what the morals are. And I don't think you disagree with that. But I want to mostly talk about what Nancy said. It's male dominance, not just white dominance. There was a cartoon after the Supreme Court leak. There were a bunch of dogs sitting around the table. And now we're going to, and they said, and now we're going to discuss the health of cats. And there was a movie also, a woman was hiding birth control pills under her bed because she didn't want to get pregnant. And when her husband found out, he was furious and he left her because he wanted a woman who would provide him babies. Kamala Harris said in the Senate confirmations, she asked Brett Kavanaugh, can you name a law that regulates a man's body? And he couldn't come up with one. I can't come up with one. I mean, clearly a man's body can't kill another man or woman, but that's not the same thing. And Betty White famously said, if men had to have abortions, they'd be available at Jiffy Lube. So this is definitely an issue of white male dominance. And we don't need to lose track of that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next is Pedro.
Yeah, I've been stumbling along in this conversation, trying to understand my own perspective, but I appreciated what Marla said, not necessarily that I agree with it 100%, but it provoked some reflections. The idea that everyone is entitled to their own morals, I don't think necessarily negates the fact that there are certain rights versus wrongs that I think cross across cultures in all of humanity. I'm not so sure what those are, but I think I have faith that there are some. You know, it's interesting in this debate, you know, on this Russian invasion of Ukraine. One of the things that's getting no airtime at all is a perspective that the Russian government expressed some time ago of what they call indivisible national security, that every country has a right to national security unless it interferes with my national security and profoundly puts my country at risk. And I think that's the same kind of thing I kind of relate to indivisible rights and morals, that we all have our rights to morals as long as they do not infringe in a pejorative way on others. The whole issue of abortion is such a slippery slope. I believe at some point, you know, perhaps there should be a red line at which, you know, you discontinue the abortion option, but certainly the woman should have that right for many, many months before that red line is approached to do as she feels is appropriate and such. But anyhow, thanks for the discussion.
Thank you, Pedro. Next is Greer, and then we'll go into the wrap up.
I think a lot of people who are pro-life are actually on the side of abortion. Because just because you're pro-life, that doesn't mean you don't take in account the circumstances at which and how children are born and the complications to mother and child and other issues. So I don't think every person who's pro-life is like straight line with no wavering back and forth with it. And also, somebody said it, these children are being born and there is no male accountability and responsibility with this choice of a child being born. If you're going to force a child to be born, then the man has to step up. And even with, we have court systems, we have men being taken to court. Just because you're taken to court, that doesn't mean child support has to be paid. That doesn't mean you have to be involved in your child's life. Is that not the whole point of creating a child, is to raise them in a nurturing environment with parents? So they're missing the point. Again, I think it's more than just male white supremacy, because you have white women backing these men up, and they are women. And they have reproductive organs. They may or may not have children, but they're standing right beside them and going along with this. Like with the Haitian Revolution, they knew there would be two fights, the fight amongst themselves and the fight with the French. What they did was cleared house amongst themselves before they fought the larger fight. That's what's going on here. That's it.
Thank you, Greer. Next, we'll go into the wrap up with the people who have not spoken, and I have Marion, Glenn, and Nora. Is there anybody else that did not speak? Okay, Marion, you're up. 2 minutes. You're unmuted.
Okay, this is such a hot button, divisive issue, and that's putting it mildly. I don't think a man should have anything to say as far as a woman controlling issues concerning her body. And I can say this without blinking my eyes or turning my head away or lowering my eyes. I'm the mother of 3 adult children. And I love them with all my heart. I can honestly say I go through hell and high water for them, even though they're full-grown adults. But the bottom line is, no man, I don't care what his position is on this planet, has a blasted thing to say about a woman issues concerning carrying a baby. No man. I don't care what his station is in life. Now, if the woman's husband has something to say, that's another issue. But some stranger, and for Samuel Alito to make that commentary, I wonder if the man understands how infuriated there are women in this country, and I'm one of them. How dare that man? I would stand on his toenails and tell him, how dare you even put out a syllable concerning something as serious as this. It shouldn't have a blasted thing to say about a woman's body and her choice as to whether or not to carry a baby to term.
Thank you, Marion. Glenn, you're next.
I'm sorry I missed most of this discussion. I was, I just woke up, and but I'll say this: that as a Muslim, in the Holy Quran, it speaks specifically to that. It says, "Do not kill, do not abort your children for the fear of poverty." My mother had 9 children, and we were in poverty. you know, my father couldn't advance himself in the Jim Crow era. The jobs were, you know, was suppressive. So I wouldn't be here based on, you know, that, you know, that you would think about not having the money to raise a child, but we all were raised. By the grace of God, we all were raised. We didn't starve to death. We all were healthy. But I also, you know, I don't have nothing in my religion say that the female should be punished if she does have an abortion. There's nothing in there that says she should be punished. But I also believe that that the government, we don't want the government making that decision for the woman, but we also don't want the government paying to have an abortion. I think it is. I think it's a sin to have an abortion because it's been given to me by Scripture that is against God's law to have an abortion. But that's something that each individual has to deal with. Not that the government should be the punisher. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Glenn. Nora, you're next.
I don't have any comments, but thank you to all of you that made yours. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me change this to 1 minute. So, Dee Dee, that's for you in the chat about the class. So let me see. We'll start with Nancy for the 1 minute wrap up.
I think that any law or government or state that would force a 12-year-old child to have a child after incest or rape is immoral. That is immoral. All right. And there should be, this country was supposed to have been founded on the basis of separation in church and state, and it's never been that way. That is a farce. Okay. And lastly, to say that the people that we have in power, the men that are in power and hold government positions and who are able to influence these decisions or make these decisions or make these laws. One of them, I don't remember which one it was, but this was a while ago, he made a statement about what about the case of incest or rape, okay? And he said, in the case of rape, if it's a legitimate rape, the woman's body has a way of just shutting that whole thing down. Now, if that is the kind of ignorant people that we have in office, we are in serious trouble because they truly don't understand. There's so many things on that level. If they could make a statement like that they don't need to be in office, they don't need to be in power, and they certainly do not need to have any power over a woman's body or her decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Dee Dee?
I think that Bill's summation of this situation with the cartoon about the dog making decisions about cats is very, very clear and very appropriate. It was a cute way of saying it, but that is what's going on. And I thank you, Bill, for sharing that, because that was wonderful. That's exactly what's happening. And we need to not let it happen. Whatever we have to do to not let it happen, we
Sorry,
need
Bill,
to not let it happen.
you don't get to say anything right now, Bill. Dee Dee, thank you. Next is Marva. Marva. Sorry, I realized maybe you couldn't understand me. You're still muted. You're still muted.
Unmute, Ma. You're still muted.
Do you want me to come back? Okay, Stanton.
Yeah, just Nancy, so you know, the idiot that made that statement, fortunately, he lost his race, fortunately. But I just wanted to say, Marion, I really just bravo to everything you said there. I couldn't agree more with what you said, and I could sense the anger and the resentment that you're expressing it with, and yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's it.
Thank you, Stanton. Bill, you're next.
Phyllis, first, thanks for the article. It really made me think. And as I said, I first I didn't understand it, but then I got an aha in the middle of the night. It made perfect sense. I also want to thank Greer for bringing up the issue of male responsibility. That's something we didn't talk about that much, but the people who make the law skirt the issue of male responsibility, and it should be, the male should be responsible as well, but the male should not have control over the his female partner's body, and should not be able to dictate whether she has an abortion or not. That's up to the woman from my perspective. Again, thank you for everyone for your comments, and thank you, Phyllis, for the article.
Thank you, Bill. Marva, do you want to try again? Yes, there you go.
Okay, and I enjoyed this very interesting views. I can remember when life or death was put in the husband's hands. She had to sign for a hysterectomy. It didn't matter if she has terminal cancer, of sexual thinking on a man's part. He was gonna miss the excitement of a climax that he didn't control. And so many women died because the husband didn't sign for a hysterectomy. I'm glad that we had advanced to life and to making life in that decisions of woman has control over her own surgical procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Next is Pedro.
Sorry about
It's
that
okay.
delay. Anyhow, yeah, I was thinking that, you know, if you are a racist, consciously or unconsciously, then you have been traumatized. You've been alienated from what I believe our species being. And I think it kind of goes, you know, tied a little bit to the question of who sets morals. I agree, society influences those choices so much. And if we grow up in a racist or otherwise pejorative generating society, then those choices or those morals are going to be affected at some rate, you know, to some amount. And it just occurs to me that it all kind of seems to emanate from this economic inequality in my mind, that you have this huge chasm between those that the elites and everyone else. And from that system kind of yields that society that then inbreeds these types of prejudices and other divisive things. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Larry?
I think if a woman is pregnant and an ultrasound determines that that baby is seriously deformed and would stand no chance of living a normal life, and that mother has to make a decision, a moral decision, to terminate that pregnancy, I'm not going to condemn her. Rape, incest, I'm not going to condemn such a one. But I think my point has been made by several statements this morning, recognizing that it is a baby. Many of you have said it's a baby. And if it's a baby, I think that baby could not be there, except the creator of life itself, God, allowed that baby to be there. And we look back on our society from slavery to segregation, Jim Crow, all of those things were immoral. And the only way we can correct an immoral society is with morality. And this might sound a little bit strange, but yes, a woman has a choice over her body, and she has the control of whether or not she's going to have sex or not. Sex creates babies. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Next, Cheryl.
I got to speak to a client this week and this subject came up, and she's white. She let me know that her great-grandmother, the family knew that she died after having several children from an illegal abortion. And I said, wow, that was early 1800s. And she said, yes, she was very thankful. She actually considers herself pro-life, but she was very thankful that women right now have the access, if they need it, to clean and safe care on this subject. I really want to thank Marianne for her discussion. She really capped things off for me. I don't want to talk a lot about my feelings about abortion or any of those things to any of you. That's not what this Zoom was about. And my morals and my beliefs are mine. And I really appreciate that everyone shared theirs and I got to learn some things. I can see just from our way of being with this, how divisive this subject is. And maybe we'll get to hear about something next week that will be chosen by people in power to try to divide my country more and more and more and more. It's very sad. I might have to go have at least a sweet cup of coffee or maybe find a sweet in my kitchen after this meeting. But I do thank you because this really was something to listen to and understand people more from all of their perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Marla, with an L.
Yep, I don't have much to add, except that after reading this article, which I really thought brought a very interesting light to the issue, and just once again reminded that it's very important to continue efforts to find alternatives to the way we do things now, to systems, patriarchal systems that are already in existence and that have been in existence for hundreds of years. So continuing to find creative ways to do things differently. There are different ways to do things, and the way we've done it doesn't mean it's the way that it should always be. And that's all.
Thank you. Greer.
The same people who want to legislate this also are the same ones when if their family member, child or daughter gets into a problem, or their son, girlfriend gets into a problem, they're going to take and leave the country to have an abortion done, because we can't have their lives be ruined. They've always gone outside the law to protect their own while relegating us to a separate standard of living. And I'm going to counter what Mr. Larry said. A man controls where he deposits his sperm. 2, thank you.
Thank you, Greer. Don't forget about the mistresses that need abortions. So I have a lot to say. I think one of the ways that this white supremacy plays into the anti-abortion movement is that people of color are kept poor and uneducated and in substandard housing, and also poor white people who are the ones that the more elite white people try to stir up to engage in acts of racism and the idea that they're being replaced by people of color in this country. Because don't forget, it's not that many years from now when we're going to be a minority majority country, as they call it. But that means people who were previously considered the minority will be the majority as a group. I have come to think of myself not just as pro-choice, but as pro-abortion. And I don't think it matters when life begins. And here's why. There's lots, and I can attest to this through my work, there's lots of people on waiting lists for transplants, for organ transplants. And no one is forced to, even after they're dead, if they didn't want to donate, they don't get their organs donated. So this law is basically giving a corpse more rights than a living woman who has possibly medical needs, possibly concerns for the children that she already has given birth to, that she won't be able to care for them. And the reality is, it's great to say, don't abort your kids because you're worried about poverty, but where's the culture providing for those kids? That's not our culture. Women are going to be criminalized under these laws that are going into, will go into effect in all the red states if the final decision comes out close to what the draft was. Women will be criminalized for having miscarriages accidentally, because sometimes pregnancies end in miscarriage. It's possible that in vitro fertilization will be outlawed because they're keeping little, whatever the little clumping of cells is, they're keeping those in freezers. The same-sex marriage decision could be overturned. Interracial marriage could be done away with. These are all mentioned in this draft. I don't know how Clarence Thomas is going to support that last one since his wife is white. So he might want that struck out, just saying. Voting rights, of course, they're already being endangered. And pregnancy is not a punishment for a woman having sex and enjoying sex. It is not a punishment. So if a woman gets pregnant from pleasure, but decides she can't keep the child, she can't give birth to it, I think it's her right to decide to abort that child. And I think that I agree with some white women are supporting white men who do not understand that women need to have bodily integrity and autonomy to be full citizens. And I don't want to get caught up ever again in the language of when life begins or when it goes from an embryo to a fetus to a baby. It's irrelevant. I am a living human being. And as are any woman who could be pregnant. And we have the right to decide what's going to happen with our bodies. That clump of cells should not take precedent over the life of a person who's already born. And I will just wrap up by adding that my mother had me, well, I have two things to say. My mother had me when she was 5 days away from her 18th birthday. She was not married. And we were having a conversation once about, she wasn't pro-choice or pro-abortion. This was later when I was older and in college. And she said, well, what if Roe versus Wade had been in effect when I got pregnant with you and I had decided to have an abortion? And I told her, I wish you had had that ability to make such a decision. You deserve to have that ability. And I'm sure I didn't change her mind. I'm sure she was surprised. If I'm not here, I don't know I'm not here. So the other thing I wanted to comment on is what Greer said about white men are becoming white women. I think you're talking about trans people. And I would just say that a lot of trans people start out very young knowing that they're a different gender, sort of internally and spiritually and psychologically. So even if they don't get to transition until they're a lot older, they still have a lot of feelings about themselves as being women. So that doesn't stress me too much. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. I want to thank everybody for their time and their comments, and then we'll now do